Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are cracking open a historical and political paradox that's playing out right now in Iran.
A really fascinating one.
Yeah, why is the Islamic Republic, a state founded on religious identity, suddenly so obsessed with pre-Islamic kings?
It's a stunning and I think deeply revealing pivot. For decades, the regime defined itself in opposition to that ancient Persian past.
Right, they wanted to erase it.
Exactly. They pursued this project to fully Islamicize society. But now, following the high tensions, what our sources are calling the recent 12-day war, we see the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, conspicuously invoking ancient Persian monarchs.
And specifically the Sasanians, right? Not just any monarchs.
Specifically the Sasanians, which is very telling.
So this sounds like an ideological emergency. This can't be a genuine change of heart. It has to be tactical. What's the mission of our deep dive today?
Our mission is to analyze this tactical use of history. We need to unpack why the Sasanian era is being invoked and not, say, earlier, more popular dynasties. And then we need to examine how this appeal to nationalism reflects the profound legitimacy crises facing both the current regime and the monarchist opposition that's trying to replace it.
Let's jump straight into that pivot then.
Let's do it.
This whole fascination seems to focus on one specific historical victory. It's about the Sasanian king Shapur I defeating the Roman Emperor Valerian.
Back in the mid-3rd century AD.
So what's the nugget of history that Khamenei is using here, and why that one?
The detail they are broadcasting everywhere is the image of the defeated Roman Emperor Valerian kneeling before the Persian king Shapur I.
The ultimate image of submission.
It's the ultimate display of projected strength. And the tactical goal is, it's pretty clear. Rally domestic support by projecting unwavering power against any potential foreign conflict, whether it's the U.S. or Israel.
But, I seem to remember that historians actually debate that famous image. Was Valerian even kneeling?
That's a fantastic detail. Because historically, there's a lot of debate over the surviving rock carvings. Some scholars argue Valerian was actually standing alongside Shapur.
Just being led captive.
Just being led captive. But the idea of the great Roman emperor kneeling, that's the psychological weapon the regime needs right now. The subtext is simply, we will not be defeated.
And if they lose face, they feel they lose everything.
Exactly. The regime has calculated that retreat or backing down is far more dangerous to its survival than war itself. But this historical pivot, it's fundamentally a reaction to an internal collapse.
What do you mean?
The entire foundational project to transform the nation into an ummat, a religious community.
That's failed.
It has failed.
Completely.
And what's the clearest evidence of that failure?
Our sources point directly to the regime's retreat on compulsory hijab enforcement. That shift is the major symbol of the dissolution of their core ideological project.
Because if the mandated religious code can no longer be enforced,
the ideological glue is gone. It's dissolved. So nationalism becomes the ideological Band-Aid. But why now? Why this late, almost desperate-sounding move?
Because they face a severe legitimacy crisis, especially after the 2022 uprising. This is what you could call controlled nationalism, an attempt to create a new unifying narrative.
But one that's completely controlled by them.
One that is entirely subservient to regime survival. It is, to use the phrase, a calculated lie intended to distract from the fact that they are politically, empty-handed.
Okay, so if they are that desperate for a unifying glue, why risk invoking the Sasanians? Why not the Achaemenid Empire, Cyrus the Great, Darius, who are, generally viewed much more favorably around the world?
And that is the crucial distinction. If you connect this to the bigger picture, the Sasanian period, which ran from 224 to 651 AD, it aligns structurally much closer to the current theocracy.
How so?
Well, the earlier dynasties, the Achaemenian and Ashkanian eras, we're speaking 2 millennia ago, but they had relative freedoms, a kind of ethical governance. They often tolerated multiple faiths.
And the Sasanians reversed that.
Precisely. The Sasanian period was defined by strong centralization and, really significantly, the establishment of Zoroastrianism as the official state religion.
A fusion of political and religious power.
Exactly. Which mirrors the Islamic Republic structure perfectly.
But history shows that fusion led to, internal rot, didn't it?
It did. The Zoroastrian priests, the Mohammedan, became deeply corrupt. People grew tired of the state religion and started gravitating toward emerging faiths like Christianity. This internal weakness is what made the eventual entry of Islam so much easier.
So Khamenei is drawn to a model of a state where religion and politics are one, regardless of the fact that it ended in collapse.
Subconsciously, or maybe even intentionally, it's a familiar structure.
So the regime is repeating the historical structure of a failure point.
Oh.
And speaking of centralized power, let's talk about the leader himself. What's the logical endpoint of such absolute power on an individual's self-perception?
It leads straight to, frankly, intense delusion. And our sources provide a really shocking anecdote that illustrates this perfectly. It's been observed that when Khamenei sits for public speeches or meetings, his feet reportedly do not make direct contact with the ground.
What?
A riser or a stool is used to avoid becoming defiled.
Wow. I mean, that physical separation is just so symbolic of a person's self-perception.
It is. It reflects an immense, almost divine delusion of being elevated and separate from the common people. It's strikingly similar to how Mohammad Reza Shah saw himself as God-chosen, which he famously talked about with Oriana Fallaci.
He's placing himself above the material world.
Yes, but that's the contradiction, isn't it? He's not just a symbolic figure.
Not at all. Despite that spiritual self-elevation, Khamenei is extremely pragmatic. He's materially involved in every minute detail of the state.
From foreign policy to the judiciary to the economy. And this extreme centralization, the single-person decision-making, is the operational flaw that absolutely guarantees the regime's failure in the long run. No complex 21st century country can function when a single person is managing every single dial.
So now we have this competition for the past. Khamenei invoking the centralized Sasanians and the opposition, particularly Reza Pahlavi, invoking earlier, more liberal figures like Cyrus.
The Achaemenians.
Right. What does this rivalry reveal about the shared weakness of both sides?
The shared weakness is that both sides are, as I said, empty-handed. They're seeking to attach themselves to ancient, often imagined glory to obscure their total lack of current political legitimacy.
It's a proxy war fought with dead kings.
Because neither can secure genuine popular trust in the present.
You know, it reminds me of Mohammad Reza Shah's famous the 2500-year celebrations, that huge, spectacular display that ultimately couldn't save his regime.
That is the perfect historical counterpoint.
Yeah.
Because we have to understand what modern nationalism means, in the 20th and 21st centuries.
Yeah.
It has to be defined as leading the country toward democracy, self-determination, and independence, not toward symbolic conquest or grand historical displays.
So the Shah's famous proclamation, Cyrus, sleep for we are awake, was fragile because it wasn't democratic.
It was. True 20th century nationalism in Iran was really epitomized by Mohammad Mohades. His whole focus was on achieving independence through democratic institutions, like establishing the National Oil Council.
That required democratic will.
Yes, whereas the Shah's version only required spectacle.
And this raises a critical question for you, the listener. Where does legitimacy even come from for an opposition movement that's operating under a dictatorship?
It comes only from active struggle and resistance against that dictatorship. The credibility is earned through sacrifice, and this is the fundamental legitimacy gap facing the monarchist opposition today.
You mean with Reza Pahlavi's highly symbolic announcements, like forming the Immortal Guards?
Exactly. Those symbolic moves are seen as trying to co-opt the hard-earned credibility of domestic resistance groups, the uprising centers.
And what's really telling?
What's very telling is that while they use every other word related to historical glory, they often avoid the crucial political word, resistance.
Which avoids confrontation.
Yes, but it highlights the deficiency in their own legitimacy, the kind gained through active struggle.
So history is being weaponized by both sides. For the listener and, well, for the Iranian population, how crucial is historical consciousness in successfully overthrowing despotism and building something sustainable?
Oh, it's absolutely vital. History must serve as a lamp for the future. What's different today, I think, is that the younger generation is significantly more interested in analyzing history and its painful lessons.
More so than the generation from the 1979 revolution.
Yes, who are perhaps, overly naive about the replacement regime.
So what's the most important historical lesson to learn from this deep dive?
That escaping the current well of Khamenei only to fall back into the ditch of the Shah is unacceptable. The shift must be absolute. Meaning the focus has to be on building a future based on democratic institutions, established from the bottom up through local councils, regional bodies, genuine civil society. Freedom is taken by the people. It is not given by a new, supposedly benevolent leader.
Let's talk about the critical mass needed for this change. There's the gray layer, the fluid majority that often sits out of politics until the last minute. Should activists focus on winning them over?
The consensus among experts is that the political focus should be less on courting this fluid majority.
And more on what?
More on achieving maximum satisfaction and organization within the resistance corps. Since the 2022 uprising, experts estimate that a staggering 90 to 95% of the Iranian people have definitively moved past the current regime.
90 to 95%.
The political landscape is already decided in the minds of the people.
That is a staggering statistic. How does that connect to the final push for change?
It connects to sociological theories of civil resistance. Analysts like the American sociologist Gene Sharp suggested that only a small percentage, sometimes as low as 3%, of a cohesive, organized population is needed to seize political power.
Even in complex societies.
Even in complex societies, the majority, that gray layer, only steps into action when victory is visible right in front of them.
So the organizers have to act first.
The dedicated organizers must see the sun of freedom in the darkest night. The masses wait until daylight breaks.
That's a powerful distinction for anyone considering how change actually happens.
It is. Ultimately, the current struggle is not between a symbolic Sasanian king and a symbolic Achaemenian king. It's between the centralized delusion of power, which history shows always collapses, and the promise of decentralized, bottom-up democracy.
So, to summarize our deep dive, Khamenei's appeal to ancient kings is a desperate, strategic lie to cope with a profound legitimacy crisis.
Absolutely. And history shows that true nationalism requires democracy and independence.
And both the regime and the opposition are using the past to distract from their current lack of credibility.
And in a democratic Iran, history will be a paramount subject of study. The study of history is crucial not just for understanding the mistakes of past despots, but for understanding ourselves today.
And making sure the future isn't just a repeat.
To ensure that our future actions are built on solid, decentralized ground.
Something to think about as you consider the role of history in shaping your own future. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.